Hello, welcome to the latest edition of Digital Badge Academy's webcast. I'm your co-host, Jim Daniels, here with fellow co-host David Leeser, who's going to kick things off for us today. David, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Nate Otto from Skybridge Skills for joining us. Nate, I think that our history goes back, oh my gosh, it's going on 10 years or something like that right now, at least 8 years, right?
Yeah, indeed. And it's nice to be with you again in this new context.
So why don't we just kick it off with just starting, just a little bit about your backstory. And you have been a thought leader in the digital badge or open badge space since nearly the beginning. But what got you into it? And then how did you get to a position where you're literally influencing the standard?
Well, thank you for the recognition. I have indeed been involved in badges for a long time, and I'm sticking with it. I started in 2012, and I've told this story a number of times, most recently to a few folks at the Badge Summit last week. I was working a retail job, and I had a morning off because I was assigned jury duty. But the trial ended up getting canceled, and I was sitting on Twitter drinking bad coffee in the courthouse and watching on Twitter as folks at the Mozilla Drumbeat Festival in Barcelona were talking about open badges. And then I thought, this is a really cool idea. They're sharing just little tiny snippets of this conversation about what the idea of educational digital credentials could become, where we could take this concept from games and move it into the learning space to recognize skills. And I was sparked. My interest was piqued right there, but it wasn't until a year or two later when the MacArthur Foundation and the Mozilla Foundation came together to really establish a program around this, to start work on what interoperability would mean, and to build some reference software where I had the opportunity to get involved again. I joined some community calls that Mozilla Foundation was offering, took Wednesday mornings off from that work at the department store, and was able to contribute to the discussion, but mostly listen for a while. Eventually, I worked my way into a research position at Dan Hickey's lab in the Learning Sciences Department at Indiana University, studying how other programs were using digital badges through MacArthur's DML4 competition. My main outcome of what I learned from that research was that people had really great ideas in this space, but at the time, back in 2013, 2014, they didn't have very well-equipped software to make their dreams reality and deliver the badge systems that they hoped to use to engage with learners and help those learners to share their accomplishments. So I had at that point been introduced to Wayne Skipper from Concentric Sky, and I talked to him about getting my feet wet, getting into the dirt, the code maybe, and writing some software to improve the digital badges landscape. So we created the Badger platform together, which then 8 years later was acquired last year by Instructure, where it continues as Canvas badges or Canvas credentials. I took my exit at that point in 2022 and founded a new company called Skybridge Skills, where I'm hoping to refocus my energy on the idea of communities of practice in the digital badging space, and discovering how we can learn or use digital badges to learn how communities can support one another in skill development and in understanding the emerging skills that are coming up all around us. So I do consulting, but I also am putting out a new badge platform set for open source release this December at the EPIC conference in Vienna. It's called ORCA, or Open Recognition Community App.
Super interesting background. It's interesting when you talk to folks like yourself and others who have found themselves sort of full-time focused in this space, how they fell into it, right? I mean, David and I could tell, similar stories, I think, and just how by accident, we ended up focused in this. But kind of taking a step back and thinking about open badges, standards, and that, I know, Nate, that you had a very heavy hand in how that has evolved. And I'm wondering if you could highlight some of the things for the benefit of our audience, because I think it's important that we have the opportunity to speak with someone who had a heavy influence and really spent a lot of time working to help drive those standards forward. And there's some pretty cool functionality that exists today because of your involvement. And maybe you could just give us kind of a quick rundown of some of those things that stand out in your mind in terms of where we're at today with standards around digital badging.
Yeah, great question. And I've done a lot of work in this space and been honored to work with you and with a lot of other folks for many years now. And the standards layer of that was really strong layer. In this community, we have a community of developers and companies that come together to implement common web standards. We've been talking about open badges since 2010, and now with the release of the 3.0 standard that is in progress this year, we're actually sort of merging the open badges community with an even larger technical interoperability community over at the W3C, because open badges is implementing the W3C standard of the verifiable credentials data model. And that change with Open Badges 3.0 was a long way coming, starting back in 2014, when the work was still under the safeguarding of the Mozilla Foundation, as it was spinning out the Badge Alliance, which was sort of an interim proto-standards body that shepherded that work. I had the honor of leading the Badge Alliance for a year and then helping the standard graduate into IMS Global, now called One Ed Tech, where it can have sort of the full IP protections and member contribution that we generally associated with top tier web standards. But all the way back in 2014, we were talking about the idea of cryptographic signatures and these envelopes for messages that you could send any claim about a user. And now that's becoming real with Open Badges 3.0 and the parallel standard that has grown up at the W3C since then, the verifiable credentials data model. So I got involved in the standards development process just by showing up to conversations that were open to the web. And a lot of people maybe don't know that there are layers of these web standards processes that are open to anyone who's interested to show up. And then sometimes there are levels that are protected, or voting rights that are protected to only certain organizations that are paying contributors supporting the work. But anyone who wants to get involved today can follow a similar path to what I did by joining some of the open community calls in the space, such as the community credentials community group at the W3C, or also the Verifiable Credentials for Education Task Force at the W3C. And then besides that, out in the Open Badges community, we try and have a lot of open conversation. And so there are groups such as Open Recognition is for Everybody, formerly called Keep Badges Weird, that's run by the We Are Open co-op. Great spaces to get involved in the conversation. And if you see a feature that you wish the spec had at that point, or you get inspired like I did, you can contribute kind of directly to the standards themselves by opening issues on GitHub, getting involved and talking to the people who are making the decisions about which bits go where, and how the various different pieces of tooling will work.
Quick follow-up or follow-on to that. You have been heavily involved in something known as open pathways. So I wonder if you could kind of help us understand a little bit of the background on that, where that stands today, and just kind of give us the skinny on open pathways.
All right, so in 2016 to 2018, I was doing a bunch of work on the concept of pathways. And this came out of some previous discussion that we had been having at the Badge Alliance around how badges are connected to one another. There was a demonstration project done around 2014 showing many different models for how badges could be connected to one another. The idea of a meta badge came out of that work, where several small order badges could be completed, and then a user could level up to a level 2 or higher order badge. And I really wanted to try and bring this work to actual application in software, but also be open to interoperability in an open standards sense, just like open badges are interoperable. So within the Badger product that I was working on at the time, we built a pathways feature where users could create these meta badges and create other progressions with completion rules, enabling learner choice and navigation through a learning program. The concept of open pathways is a little bit bigger than that, perhaps, because we do want this interoperability piece as well, where information about what pathways exist might travel from one system to another. And that work has informed the development of the CTDL pathways classes that are part of this credentials transparency description language offered by Credential Engine. And you might have seen recent announcements this summer from Credential Engine. I think just in the last couple of weeks, they've launched their pathway editor tool. And so now within the credential registry publishing environment that Credential Engine offers, organizations can show up and place the various different credentials, courses, experiences, and other components onto pathways that might end in access to a certain career. The idea here is just to show what is the landscape of how various different learning experiences and credentials, including some digital badges, can be connected with one another.
Yeah, it's an exciting piece of work, and I'm glad to see Credential Engine pick up and continue to carry that forward. I know, David, you and I think from the outset when we first started working on the IBM digital badging program back in, well, you started before I did, Dave, in 2014. I hopped on board in 2015, but shortly thereafter, it was pretty apparent that it would have been more advantageous if we had had some sort of pathway structure built in to the standards, or at least just from a feature perspective, to kind of help manage these constellation of credentials that can come together and, really chart out a learning journey for someone. Sorry, David, I think I interrupted. You were about to ask
No,
something.
that's exactly right. I mean, there are things that we were asking for in 2014 that still aren't here, right? And they're common business sense type of requests. Like you said, the pathways was another one. The idea of equivalence for badges was another one. That, how can somebody who's a consumer of badges understand if badge A equals badge B? And I think it's finally starting to emerge. And so, yeah, I mean, that's a really good one, Jim, because we had our list, and we still have our list, right, of the
We
things that we think
do, yeah.
badges need. Nate, what's your list of what you think that in order for this to really become I don't know, it already is becoming an alternative to a lot of other older types of credentials. But what do you think it really needs? What's missing right now?
Sure. And as far as digital badges becoming an alternative to older types of credentials, that's happening in two ways. One being that new credentials that people didn't know about are now being offered for the first time, or at least the first time kind of popularly in digital badge format, which then makes it possible for word of them to spread in different ways as people, for example, share them to their certifications on LinkedIn, and others see the value of the qualification and follow in their footsteps. But also we're seeing credentials that already existed just being presented within a cryptographically verifiable format. And open badges is the most common standard for credentials of in the learning and workforce skills ecosystem. But sometimes people don't realize from the name that the concept can really cover any type of learning credential all the way up through the terminal degree of a higher education program. We're not seeing a huge number of those really, really high number of years to credentials issued under this format yet, but the standard enables that. And I think that we should understand that it's just a generic envelope in which you can make any claim about learning.
What do you think's missing right now, or what do you think is and actually maybe what is coming in the number 3 standard?
Perfect. So you're right when you ask about what's missing in this space to mention the idea of the consumer of credentials. We've seen a lot of effort over the last 10 years dedicated into issuing tools, both within learning environments such as LMSs, but also standalone platforms that publish badges and in these open formats, but we have not seen a large number of products come into the space that are intended to consume these credentials and make meaning out of them. The pathways work that we talked about provides one window into a way in which consumption might occur, where you can create these little rule sets that say credentials A plus B plus C equals my credential D. But that's just one example of how credential data can come into a system and be transformed into some other kind of local business logic. We need a lot more of that. And so in order to understand the value of credentials as they apply to someone's ability to get a job or to demonstrate their talents, what they can do, or what others trust them to do, we need to be able to make that information understood at scale as it moves, to the other networks and communities that they make part of their educational journey. And so this is an aspect of the credentials ecosystem that I really want to focus on with my new company, Skybridge Skills. In addition to producing the open source ORCA software that provides a little home base for a community that is using digital badges, it serves as the achievements layer of their ecosystem that they could use alongside a messaging tool or a learning management system or any other components of their learning and recognition program. I'm also building the Skybridge Skills directory, which helps understand how credentials are being used and consumed across many different communities. And any community that's using the open source ORCA tool can both pull data down from the Skybridge Skills directory, but also push data into it, representing information about how they are accepting credentials from various different communities. I think that there's two approaches and two schools of thought in the digital credentials, digital badges ecosystem around how value can be understood to relate to individual badges. One is that we go with sort of this high rigor, high metadata approach, where we put a whole lot of information into the credential itself about how valuable it is, that helps human consumers read that data, understand what assessment process a learner might have gone through to obtain the credential, and then they can translate that to value within their local systems. Another school of thought, which I'm going to put my chips on and try and see if I can build some services to make this real, is to build up little tiny pieces of data about how others are consuming individual credentials, and then be able to make that data available to future consumers to be able to understand what trust signals there are in the market around a particular credential. I think this approach can scale in a way that is more powerful ultimately than an approach that depends on individual humans reading that data. And so I'm really excited to start playing with these ideas where multiple different communities are exchanging trust information, probably in the interoperable format of an Open Badges endorsement credential, that then will add up to essentially peer-to-peer reviews of particular credentials, credential programs and issuers, and more, that is all available at the fingertips when you're looking at a particular badge within a community.
Because I'm totally with you. I think that people have pigeonholed badges in a way that they think that the trust comes from this verifiable, like you said, legally defensible, psychometrically sound assessment that's associated with it, and not something else. And I remember Wayne Skipper said at one conference, I think it was in Denver, we said, who's to say my dexterity in my hand is not more valuable than your college degree in a VR world? And I had the hardest time at IBM even getting people to understand that these so-called soft skills were actually better predictors of success on the job than the technical skills. And they just wouldn't have it. Now, finally, they are starting to have it. They're starting to, they're becoming believers that, we should be, because when I created this new color certificate program at IBM, we wanted to badge, what people's, passions and interests and capabilities were up front. And that would lead to then getting them into a training path. But if you don't do the work up front on the foundational level to say what are their cognitive skills, what are their personality traits and everything else, why bother teaching them Excel if you know that they're going to want to work outdoors with animals?
I think that's interesting. And the other notion about the skills that are really valuable in the ecosystem is a lot of these soft skills, 21st century skills, or what I've recently heard called durable skills. They're not as easy to assess authentically in traditional learning programs. The actual true authentic assessment for a soft skill, I think, is a peer-to-peer embedded in practice assessment that doesn't necessarily have the same way of checking psychometric validity as you can for some of the more formal assessments that we see coming out of the academy.
There was a question brewing in my mind here.
Let me make one more follow up on this. When I was working that retail job, originally my first job out of college, I was moving up from the very basic levels and where I was, interacting with customers as a cashier, and then moving up into departments in which I needed to have specific knowledge about products and the ability to help people. But I think learning about the products we sold was one aspect of that. But what was truly valuable to me in being able to navigate that space and be effective was my ability to understand the skills that my coworkers had. And that was everything from their soft skills and communication, ability to, elicit good information from a customer about what it is that they were actually going for and needed, all the way up to the technical procedures for doing something like selling a fishing license in the state of Oregon. And when I had a pretty high degree of confidence that I understood who I was going to fall back on for help, who was working at a particular moment, who wasn't on break, then I felt like I could really navigate the space of that environment and be effective at my job. And so I hope to use digital badges and find ways to put them into our communities to create new visibility for that type of information, where we can better understand each other and then better contribute to the pool of recognition by which our coworkers understand each other using open badges.
And I wanted to go back something too that you said earlier, and because I'm intrigued by this concept of having visibility into how other consumers of credentials are actually using them, creating, and I mean, I think that would help fill a pretty major gap right now, because when I think of the three primary stakeholders or personas around the world of digital badging, digital credentialing, I think of the issuer, I think of the earner, and then I think of the consumer, right? Those that want to ingest that badging information, make decisions on it. Right now, it's pretty much just left up to each individual consumer to read what, the data that's in the credential, make sense of it on their own. There's a lot of new things, obviously, that have been emerging to help build greater context into credentials, improve the overall language that is, that's structured around credentials to make them more consumable and machine readable and all of that. But ultimately, there's that trust factor. Can I really trust that everything that's being stated here is true? And I think if one consumer sees another that's already made that leap of faith and are comfortable with, how they're using them, I think that could really help encourage people and help with that adoption at the consumer level. Because I still think that's a hill yet to be conquered. I think there's a lot of things that need to happen in that part of the digital badging and digital credentialing world. So I'll be very eager to, follow along and see how that progresses, because I think that could be really valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Understanding how badges are being consumed and creating the opportunity for them to be consumed is where I think a large amount of the value in this space ultimately will be found. And that's where I want to contribute in terms of the software that I'm putting into this space. So ORCA is available for waitlist right now. You can sign up to start a community on ORCA where your people and achievements can come together. We have our 1.0 launch scheduled for December, and then in 2024, toward the beginning of 2024, that Skybridge Skills directory will become available where we can start reporting our consumer experiences and gathering information across communities. One of the other goals of that being to increase the reusability of the same skill definitions across different communities, education to work, to advanced work, so that we can have some common language in order to share our impressions.
You know, it's interesting. You used a word that I hadn't heard somebody really using, and it's an incredibly important word, and it's understanding. We use the word trust because we know that badges need to be about trust. And we also, the verification and equivalence, but use the word understanding. And really, that's what it's all about, is really being able to develop a deep understanding about a person who has that badge. And, like you said, whether it's their passions and interests and capabilities, or it's their, technical skills. So what is ORCA exactly, and how is it going to benefit the consumers?
ORCA is a tool that tries to aim for a community being able to develop that type of understanding of one another and of the skills that matter within that community. I try and target ORCA at what I call communities that already have a reason to be together. And that might mean a small to medium employer with a team of 40, 50 people who are all trying to work together. They need to understand each other's skills. We might have a social group like a sports club or a sports league, which is concerned not only about skills and safety, but also about preserving the momentum of the engagement over time to create a really good experience for, either casual or maybe more enthusiastic or ambitious players. ORCA's a web service that creates a safe space for that community to define the skills that matter within that space, create governance rules around how those achievements might be claimed and validated, and to hold all the data for that community on behalf of the community. It doesn't cross-pollinate with anything from other communities until users are ready to, under their privacy settings, bring those artifacts out as open badges for them to flow elsewhere. But I'm delivering this as, like I say, open source software that anyone can host on their own, but it will also be something that I'll provide hosting for, and my partners in Europe, the Bit of Trust Foundation, will provide European-based hosting as well. Signups available for both of those. And I'd love to give you folks and your audience a tour of what ORCA looks like and a few of the things that you can do even at this early stage.
Do you want to do that now? Or
yeah, I could give you a quick little navigation. Let me see if I can share. All right. Now I'm sharing a view of the ORCA community that we used last week at the Badge Summit for 2023. This was an unofficial open recognition community that gathered at the Badge Summit and used this software to try and intentionally discover new ways of recognizing one another at conferences. So some of the achievements you see in this system are hastily arranged, but nevertheless, this emphasizes how quickly you can go from defining a badge that you would like to see recognized in the world to actually recognizing it and learning from the process of how it went. With ORCA, we're trying to collapse the distance between when badges are awarded and when they're consumed and understood, and resulting in new learning that results in new badge designs. And we do this collapsing of time by making it so that the community that issues the badge is also the first consumer of the badge. This local understanding of the badges issued is really important to ORCA. So let me show you around a little bit. I'm signed in here as a community admin, so I'll have sort of all of the actions available, but I'll walk through a couple of the capabilities that are available to members. I can see a list of the achievements that are available within the community. We have a basic membership badge. In many communities, there's kind of one core badge that organizes the concept of whether you are a member of the community or not. And so we allowed any attendee of the Badge Summit to claim the Badge Summit Open Recognizer 2023 badge. That badge then opened up the ability to claim a large number of other badges, either representing skills or actions that were pro-social and helped build our community at the summit. And so, for example, we have it was nice to meet you badge that was claimed, where someone could nominate one another for this badge with a little narrative showing the what it is that they did, some notion of appreciation of making that connection. And similarly, we found that a skill that is really valuable at conferences is the people who know how to make introductions between others. Making a new connection is something that we really value when we go to a conference. And so we came up with this badge to thank the people that helped make that possible for each of us. So within ORCA, there are a couple different ways in which badges are used within the community automatically and instantly as soon as they are claimed. For this one, we allowed anyone to claim the badge, but claims required review by someone who was already a member of the community, who held the Open Recognizer badge. And so nobody claimed this badge during the course of the event. So maybe I should look at a different one for an example. But this idea of nomination and review by someone else in a community is what's called a governance mechanism that enables a community to operate a badge system together. This is doing badging together more than having badging sort of done to you by an institution. It emphasizes peer-to-peer relationships between learners rather than this institutional to individual relationship where every individual is kind of left alone to their own devices to look at the badge systems and choose where they want to go next. Here we have people who have claimed and accepted badges, and I have the ability to endorse them. So I think I already endorsed Rob, who showed up at the Badge Summit and made a bunch of presentations promoting his company, Micro-Credential Multiverse, which provides education programs around how to learn concepts related to micro-credentials and putting together a badge system. He had some mic drop moments. He's really good at putting those together, so I nominated him to claim the mic drop badge. A couple other things here within the community. I have my own community backpack, so I can see all of the badges that I claimed within the context of this community. I can take any of them out. I can download them as an Open Badges v3 piece of data. I can send them to a verifiable credentials wallet, and I can put it on my LinkedIn profile or share anywhere a URL is accepted. So sticking my email signatures, resumes, anywhere that I want to share that URL, including to other Open Badges backpacks, such as Canvas Credentials or Open Badge Passport. And then, like I said, ORCA is all about doing badging together. So I can, as a member of the community, I can see the other members of the community and take a look at the badges that they have shared with me. There is a privacy level that you can set for your badges. So if you want to make them by default visible to the public, you can do that. But by default, who has what awards is something that is held for members of the community itself. So ORCA overall is the system we use to put together this Badge Summit 2023 open recognition site, but it can be used to assemble a collection of badges and users for any purpose, any community that has a reason to want to understand the achievements that are held within that community and to create the ability to recognize one another in a community.
That's fantastic, actually. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking about a client that I just worked with this past spring who wanted to build a credentialing program around community of practice. Right, it's big IT company, and they want to increase engagement. They want to just create more of a sense of belonging and membership and camaraderie and a lot of these things. And this kind of a solution would have been terrific for that. Of course, I can, now my wheels are spinning. I'm seeing all sorts of, or thinking of all sorts of applications for something like this. I like the fact that you can build it and it's contained. Still got a lot of that, very familiar functionality. If I feel like sharing it out and I want to, put it out on my profile on LinkedIn, that kind of thing, I have the ability to do that. But at the same time, also being able to kind of create this closed community and see what others are doing, almost kind of a leaderboard sort of component to it. That's pretty awesome, actually.
I'm blown away by it. I think it's absolutely, like you are, Jim. I'm thinking about all that. It's interesting. I was talking to somebody about their online training, and they said the biggest impact they made with their online training was when they created a community for follow up to the online training. That was really what really made the program take off, was when they added the community. And I think about every organization now, and particularly in the enterprise space, and particularly in the IT enterprise space, is using Slack. And I could just see this being integrated somehow with Slack to be able to say, you know what, hey, that person helped contribute to a proposal we're putting out, or an RFP, or a project that we're creating together. And this person was a big contributor. Right now, the only way they do that is through a separate, like an awards program. And then, you might give them like a $15, Starbucks card or something like that, like a hooray kind of thing. But imagine when you capture this in that data structure, what you can use that information for later, what an organization can use to say, hey, wait a minute, I have people here that I know are truly innovative in my organization. They've been recognized by their peers as being the innovators. Forget the performance reviews. This is a much better way to do it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, David, you know this. I mean, how many times have we been asked, hey, is there a way for someone to nominate someone, and give them recognition, through, with a digital badge in some form or another? And it would be, of course, like, no, this is our set of credentials. This is what we have. But this community of practice approach and the ability for someone to come in and, nominate someone, or I guess even make a self-assertion and request endorsement, for that. That is a piece that has been really elusive. I've been asked about it a lot, but have never had a good answer for anyone on how to go address that. I think this is going to be that answer based on what I just saw.
All right. Well, thank you for the sharing your excitement. I'm too very excited by this. The flexibility of the system to enable what we call these different governance rules. Communities can build whatever achievement makes sense to them, and then build the rules for how to claim it. And part of the system is to enable it to consume its own badges. So I showed you those first couple actions that are dependent on a particular badge. There might be a prerequisite before you claim, or there might be a particular achievement identified as identifying reviewers for claims. But we're going to keep opening up new capabilities in the system to users, not by whether they are a representative of the organization staff itself, but we're going to be opening up to users based on badges that they hold. And so the ability to nominate others for a particular badge, that will be based on a badge that you might hold, or it could be open to anyone in the community. But the idea is we enable these people who are already together. They have a reason to want to be together. They're talking to each other on Slack. They're trying to do work together. They should be able to do the badging together in addition, instead of it just being something that's top down. And that also means, and this is maybe very different from other badge systems, the intelligence around what the badging means, the understanding is available to all members of the community, not just the admins. We're not showing the analytics charts to just the admins. We're building analytics charts that help the entire community understand the impact of the badging and, help each individual member navigate their path to where they want to go next.
Is this going to be something that can be integrated with, like a talent acquisition platform or talent management platforms, tools like Slack or learning management systems or other badge platforms? Is that something that you would want to do or are planning to do?
Yes, it's very early stage for ORCA, but the goal for ORCA is, as a piece of open source software, is to stay both kind of simple, but at the core of the data interoperability experience. And so that means we're building out various different protocols and APIs for data to be able to flow where it needs to, and triggers that cause badge awards to come in where they need to for the benefit of the community. So every ORCA pod will be possible to integrate with from other apps via APIs that I am defining now with partners. So if you want to be a partner who likes this model and integrates with it, folks who are listening to this should come talk to me. Contact me through skybridgeskills.com. And we can build this API together. We're going to be using all of the relevant protocols from the Open Badges 3.0 API, potentially even including ActivityPub, to be able to allow communities to embed this little achievements layer of their experience in with the other tools that they use. You mentioned a community using Slack. We're in stealth mode around the product for it now, although I guess I'm mentioning it on an interview. But I am building, as part of the Skybridge Skills premium toolset, a Slack integration that will enable badging to become very conversational. The ability to recognize is something that happens in conversation, as we've done multiple times this hour for one another. We need to give that to all of the frontline employees within our organizations that are using badges, this ability to speak some recognition into being and have that exist as a portable data object that contributes to the overall health of the organization.
No, just the whole need for badging in communities, period, is huge. Everything from I think of like at IBM Skills Build and some of these other programs that are for younger audiences, people that are, from 14, 15, 16 up. There's a real need for that.
So Nate, we're just about out of time. So if someone wants to learn more about what you're up to these days, what you're doing with the work that's underway that we've talked about here, where could they go to find out more?
I'd love for folks to get on the wait list to try ORCA. You can sign up at skybridgeskills.com, and you can contact me at nate@skybridgeskills.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Nate Otto, and I will be discussing these ideas and a lot more at the EPIC conference in Vienna from December 4th through 6th. You can go to epic.openrecognition.org to sign up for that conference. Join me in Vienna. That'll be the official launch of ORCA, and we will really get into a lot of the possibilities about open recognition, or what it can become.
That's excellent. And perhaps you'd be open to us having you back when we get closer to when ORCA is released and taking a look at the finished product.
Yeah, thank you for interviewing me today. I'd love to come back, and we're building this software out rapidly, so we'll have lots more to share as that December release comes closer.
All right. Thank you so much, Nate. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Are you looking to launch a digital badging program or improve an existing one? Look no further than Digital Badge Academy. Our highly popular online masterclass will help you gain the skills and insights necessary to achieve success. Enroll now and start learning today.